Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine.
Hello everyone, I'm Troy Moling, and thank you for joining us this week on Market Journal. Got another jam-packed show for you to start off the month. Thanks for being here. And beginning the broadcast, officials in about 30 states, including Nebraska, are issuing warnings to anyone who may have received unsolicited packages of seeds from China. Many of the shipments come in white or yellow packaging with Chinese writing on them. The USDA is working with U.S. Custom and Border Protection and state departments of agriculture to investigate. In the meantime, if you receive the seeds, there are some things you need to do.
Nebraskans that may have received this suspicious seed are asked to hold on to that seed and any packaging or labels that come with it. Please do not plant the seed. There doesn't appear to be anything nefarious about these other than it appears to be a brushing scam where unsolicited packages are sent to individuals and then false reviews are created in an effort to boost sales. However, there are concerns that the seeds themselves could be state or federal noxious weeds or could carry plant pathogens, insects, or diseases that are not known to occur in Nebraska and the U.S.
To reiterate, don't plant the seeds and don't throw them away since there's the potential they could end up sprouting in a landfill. Instead, you're asked to contact Lincoln's Department of Agriculture office at 402-434-2346 to report what you've received. Next up, we've talked on the show before about how important it is to have a succession plan in place for your farm. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic is raising the issue of how prepared many of us really are. I spoke with Nebraska Extension Farm Succession Educator Allan Vyhnalek about some ways to plan for the future during these unprecedented times.
I don't have any direct evidence, but I do know from talking to providers that my anecdotal evidence says that there are more people interested in getting their estate plan put together, especially younger couples that are looking at what happens if I end up in a hospital on a ventilator and who's going to take care of those decisions that I have to make. In other words, some of the legal things that would have to be done for decisions that you have to make if you end up really sick. And so people of all ages are looking at this a little more. I'm hearing from lawyers that say, yeah, we've had more increase in foot traffic because people want to get some of those papers in order because of the pandemic.
Coronavirus has definitely been changing our lives in many ways. Does it have to be that way for estate planning, though?
I don't know that the estate planning has to be more complicated because of the coronavirus. I think that what people have to understand is that they need to think about what they have and what they want to have done to it. I think that all the coronavirus did is make it more real, meaning you better pay attention because it could be that next tractor accident, it could be the next heart attack, it could be the next brain aneurysm. This happens to be a pandemic. All those things can cause the demise of anyone at any particular point in time. So I think we just have to think about what our plans are, what do we have, and what we're going to do with it if we're gone. I mean, those are the things we have to keep in mind. And then let the lawyers deal with the complexity of the rest of it, all the tools. The lawyer apply the tool to your plan to get a good plan in place.
Okay, Allan, say I'm a producer and you are an estate planning attorney. Set the scene for us. What are some of the first things that you'd need from me as part of that estate planning conversation?
The best thing that producers can do before they go see an estate planning attorney, if they're going to put together an estate plan or haven't done one yet, is to stop and make what I would call a good balance sheet. And what I mean by that is a balance sheet, a very robust balance sheet. What I mean by that is you have an inventory of all your land, an inventory of all your other assets, including machinery, inventory of all your livestock. And you have, for this inventory, you have to include numbers and values. You have to have an inventory of all your personal belongings. You have to have an inventory of all your vehicles. And you need to have an inventory of your family. They'll want to know who's related to you and what their ages are and those kind of things. You'll have to have an inventory of all your non-farm assets that you might have, what life insurance policies do you have, what term life insurance policies have, what investments do you have annuities, do you have trusts, do you have any of those things, any of those papers that you have of where you're at right now. They need a good snapshot of where you're at right now. And if you would put all that together before you see a lawyer, and that's going to take some time, but do it and do it right, that saves you time with a lawyer. I've just saved you hundreds of dollars, because if you just go to a lawyer and say, hey, I need an estate plan, they'll go, great, I'll help you. What do you have? Oh, I got this quarter over here. Oh, hey, so where's that at? And you give them a description. Oh, and how much is that worth? And they write that down. And all the time you're talking to the lawyer and he's making this inventory for you, he'll do it, but it's costing you between $200 and $400 an hour. So if you would just get all that done first, that would help a lot. The second thing you can do is that you and your wife, or whoever you're in business partnership with, has to kind of, if you can come up with a plan of, hey, in utopia, this is what we'd like to have happen to our stuff when we're gone. Just come up with that plan. Here's what we want to happen to our stuff. Then if you have that kind of laid out, those two things alone can save you several hours in a lawyer's office and can speed up the process by quite a bit. And so that's what I would suggest to have done first.
And finally, let's talk about a webinar that you're going to be a part of on August 5th. Ag Estate Planning During a Pandemic. That's the webinar. What are some of the topics that you'll be covering?
So, yeah, we're cooperating with Monty Schatz up at Vanderdick and Weaver in Omaha. They've asked me to cooperate with them, so I said, sure, why not? We'll do it. And we're going to be talking about some of the family dynamics that can go into that, and we'll be also talking about some of the lessons I've learned doing this job for several years now. Here's some of the lessons I've learned from families. The lawyer part of the talk will be to talk about having some of these things in place, like your living will, your healthcare power of attorney, your healthcare directive. We're looking forward to people coming out, and you register for that at farm.unl.edu.
That webinar, Ag Estate Planning During a Pandemic, will take place on August 5th at noon. It's free, but you'll need to register beforehand, and you can do that anytime from now up until that event. We've got all the information on the Market Journal website. Let's get a look at the markets now, and Central Valley Ag's Luke Beckman joins me to share his analysis of what's happening in fields around the state and any advice as we head into the latter parts of summer. Luke, always great to see you. Looking at the latest USDA crop progress report for Nebraska, I was struck by just how far ahead both corn and soybeans are compared to where they were at this time last year. So is that a matter of last year's crop just having so much trouble, or is this year's just really good?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a combination of both. Last year we had a lot of troubles with the spring, if you recall, being wet, a lot of prevent plant. But yeah, you've got good to excellent ratings for the U.S. For corn is 14% better this year versus last. And on soybeans, 18% better this year versus last year. As you really start to break down the states, Troy, I mean, I'll just look at some yellow corn numbers here for Illinois, 30% better, Iowa, 12%, South Dakota, 25%, Minnesota, 28%, Indiana, 29%. The bean numbers are really a similar story. So overall, the crops are much better in pretty much every other state besides Nebraska. Nebraska really had a good crop a year ago, but it's really those other states that are really making up the difference this year.
And Luke, how do you think basis is going to move here as farmers think about cleaning out those bins for the 2020 harvest?
On the soybean side, the processors have really been getting everything they want. We're just in that point now where we're going to start transitioning from old crop to new crop, especially when you look at corn. There's a fair amount of on-farm stocks that need to move, as well as commercial stocks that need to move. And you need to remember that the ethanol industry is still trying to recover from the issues we had this spring and really facing an uncertain demand future. So I really don't expect basis to be exceptional as we clean up this old crop. The question as we get into new crop is going to be, will the dry mill in Columbus fire back up? If it does not, there's certainly some lost demand there in a typical 60-day harvest window that producers really need to be cognizant of. And if that plant doesn't fire back up, there wouldn't be expectations that harvest basis needs to firm. To the contrary, we'd probably expect basis to be softer than what producers see today for that harvest window. That said, we are in a low price environment, Troy. So once harvest gets over, you could certainly make the case that basis will have to do a little bit of work to make sure that corn continues to find its way to the end user.
And I've spoken with analysts before, and they've told me that when we get into July, there's kind of a change in market philosophy, and that's a time when we may see some rallies. Any changes in market philosophy to be aware of as we move into August?
I really think seasonal charts can offer some insight in how the market typically behaves during this time of the year. Both soybeans and corn, more so corn, really struggle from this point in the calendar until Labor Day. Typically, we see corn not have good price performance in the month of August. With everything that we're seeing today, that would certainly be my expectation, that we work on some pre-harvest lows between now and Labor Day. Typically, you do see the corn market rebound from Labor Day into the early throes of harvest. So this year's feeling very similar, Troy. We don't have a lot of crop threats. Carry out as we look into the 2021 balance sheet is inching closer to 3 billion versus 2 billion. So not a lot of reasons for the corn market to rally between now and harvest. Producers need to be mindful of that as they think about cleaning up their old crop sales. Soybeans can give you some better chances as we get into August. That is a weather critical period for crop development, as many people know. So soybeans can give us some better chances, but corn from a seasonal nature does not perform well between now and Labor Day.
Do you have any selling strategies for old and new crop?
As far as strategies go, Troy, really on the old crop corn, really feels like if you can etch $3 cash out of remaining old crop inventories, I think you should get rid of it. There were a lot of government dollars attached to that 1920 crop. We've encouraged producers to calculate that into what their overall cash average would be for that crop. There's really no reason to hold on to that. I think producers need to pitch that and start worrying about new crop. If you really want to have some price participation on that old corn, call options are very cheap. Volatility is very low. So producers could certainly step out there and buy some calls if they really felt like they had to retain some ownership at these low prices. But we're of the mindset that it's time to move away from old crop, especially when you incorporate the government dollars that have been added to the 1920 crop. Soybeans, 9 to 910 is an attractive target for November futures. If we are able to fill those, there's some key technical indicators that line up around 920, 925. Those would be attractive targets to sell remaining old crop bushels and also get some new crop sales executed. We have a very good soybean export program that's going to be taking place really September through January this year. So harvest basis is going to be better than what producers have experienced the last 2 years on soybeans, which is really the market telling those guys they need to just let their soybeans go at harvest. There's not going to be a lot of carry in the futures market for soybeans. So cash sales really make a lot of sense, in this environment for both old and new crop soybeans.
Next week, we'll be joined by Darren Fessler of Lakefront Futures and Options. If you have a question that you'd like for me to ask him, email us or get in touch on social media, and I'll pass your question along. Time now for weather with Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Al Dutcher. And Al, we're ready for August, and we are ready for a favorable forecast. What can you tell us?
Well, Troy, yes, it has been a welcome start to this beginning of this month or the end of this month with this cooler weather coming in and actually a little bit of precipitation relief in parts of the state that have been fairly dry. Although not as widespread as we'd like to see, at least we got some resemblance of precipitation once again in some of those areas that have gone a long time without some significant moisture. But we have seen an expansion on the drought monitor, and we're going to need to see more precipitation as we go into early August for us to evade further deterioration, particularly across our western portions of the state. So let's go to the upper air model and see if there's any hope down the road for some of those precipitation events. As you can see from today's upper air pattern, the precipitation that moved to the east of us has developed a very large, deep trough across the eastern United States, and that's going to be the weather story for the next week. Low pressure off to our east, cool weather has moved into our region. We're not going to be able to complain about the temperatures. A little bit of light precipitation rotating around that trough, possible across extreme eastern Nebraska, but you'll notice the flow is coming straight out of the north, and that's going to keep temperatures cooler than normal, 5 to 10 degrees below normal. Actually, will be in the 70s to 80s, and high pressure firmly in control in our region. Still going to see some scattered precipitation, particularly from there's another piece of energy rotates around that trough, but by Monday that trough starts to dig into and lift a little bit into the Great Lakes region. High pressure is going to be firmly in control. It's going to be hard pressed to break the 80-degree mark across extreme eastern Nebraska as the cool air stays in place over the northern United States and the precipitation moves off to the southeast. On Tuesday, we see that trough lifting somewhat. The tropical system that hit Florida now has moved way off in New England, but high pressure firmly in control over the Great Lakes. Very cool, dry air, almost like a fall type for forecast. We do see some precipitation trying to make its way into the Panhandle, but not much there. But by Wednesday, that ridge starts to build up. A little bit of energy rides around that, and now we start to get the chance for at least a little bit of precipitation breaking out across the Panhandle. We start to see some thunderstorm development probably Wednesday afternoon, and some of that may move across the state during the overnight hours. And by Thursday morning, we have another piece of energy moving around that upper air ridge, low pressure developing in southwest Kansas. We may see some of that precipitation breaking out across eastern Nebraska, but more importantly, the most concentrated area will be to our north and to our south. By the time we get to Friday, though, Friday morning, we'll see that energy basically going around that ridge. That's going to bring a fairly decent chance of thunderstorm activity with low pressure developing in southwest Kansas to the state. And that is, if we believe the GFS model, we'll start to see warmer air move into our region. That's going to push a warm front and associated thunderstorms from southern Nebraska all the way through eastern Nebraska as we go on through a Friday. But for western Nebraska, just not a lot of relief there. So if we go the 8 to 14 day forecast, although we keep that cool trough in place, we still have that warmth to the southwest. There are several chances of precipitation that will rotate around that upper air trough that's going to be situated over the Great Lakes, but it looks like it's going to be more in line to help eastern Nebraska, and unfortunately western Nebraska is not going to see the significant moisture. So Troy, before we get to the main wrap up, I would want to bring your attention to that tropical system that's hitting Florida, or expected to hit Florida this weekend. This is the 9th system, and we haven't even hit the end of July. Typically, we have 12 storms per season. So if this goes like normal in September, it could be very, very ugly all along the United States coastal regions, both the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic coastal region. We'll keep that in mind as we go into the fall period. So overall, we're expecting cool weather this entire week, a couple chances of decent shots of precipitation, particularly at the end of next week. Overall, can't complain entering August with this type of cool weather.
Thanks, Al. Next up, Nebraska is home to an array of agricultural characteristics which all come into play when estimating land values. The 2020 Nebraska Farm Real Estate Report was published and provides insight on trends in ag land values along with rental rates. Market Journal's Bill Dodd recently caught up with ag economist Jim Jansen to get some of the highlights from this year's report.
The biggest thing to keep in mind when perusing the farm real estate market highlights is the fact that there are certain limitations to the survey that is used to gather information for this report. More specifically, it's not intended to set precise rental rates or address other related legal matters. However, it is an informative educational tool that depicts how agricultural land values and rental rates may vary in different regions of the state. While there are limitations on the survey process, there was a bit of an extra curve thrown this year with the COVID-19 pandemic, which may have caused some fluctuation in reported rental rates and land values.
Future land values might deviate from that given the pandemic COVID-19 events surrounding that. But at least at the estimates we placed as of February 1, we estimated land values to be up slightly. The other thing that we're seeing related to long-term debt, market prevailing interest rates is historically low. And we would note the 10-year Treasury yield rate is around 1 to about 0.5% right now, which is not indicative of what land loans are going for, but it is an indication that historic interest rates for a long period of time, 10, 15, say even 30 years, they're setting some of their lowest real rates we've seen in recent history. So that's another factor that's leading to land values either being steady or slightly increasing.
The survey monitored different land classes across the state, and one key finding was that dry land cropland, as well as center pivot irrigated land, was up slightly across the state with the exception of the northwest and southwest districts. Still, with other potential variables and the effect that COVID-19 has had on commodity and livestock prices since the survey, Jim tells me there may be some fluctuation in current prices and rates.
We noted slight declines around 3, 4, 5%. In the northwest as well as the southwest districts, which is set apart a little bit. Some of the survey responses came in that there was a certain degree of concern related to specialty crop production in that area. And that being said, some of those specialty crops are raised on irrigated acres. Like I said, the survey period in which we were conducting this, we estimated the market value is always estimated at a period in time. And at that period in time, we estimated it up slightly. Now, given COVID-19 and the effects we're seeing on commodity and livestock prices, it'll be possible we might see land values head in a different direction. But the one thing I can say is we like to see gradual changes in the market value of assets instead of the extremes, either up or down.
Cash rental rates were reported to be steady to slightly higher on average across the state. However, on irrigated land, these reported rates are under the assumption that the landowner is providing the entire irrigation system. If that's not the case, some rates may be adjusted down to reflect the contributions of the renting party.
Thing to note on center pivot or gravity irrigated assumes that the rental rates reported assumes that the landlord or the land owning entity that's renting the ground out provides the entire irrigated system. So in the example for center pivot irrigated cropland, that includes the pivot, the pump, and the power unit. If the tenant provides any of those components, you would adjust the rent down because the tenant's required to either provide upkeep or acquire or whatever it might be. In those cases, we would see a cash rental rate be deducted maybe $10 to $15 an acre, $10 to $15 to account for the fact that the tenant is providing those improvements.
On the other side of the coin, as it relates to production in our state, we have grazing land. The report highlights rates on a per acre basis. However, Jim tells me that he tends to get more calls about monthly rates for one cow, one calf pair per month during the summer grazing season. When determining an agreeable price for both parties involved on grazing land, there are several other things that need to be taken into consideration.
For one cow, one calf for 1 month during the summer grazing season, we had rates reported around $50, give or take a few. The big thing on grazing land, it goes to the point, who's maintaining the improvements associated with that grazing land parcel? The big concerns that we have reported are fencing, water source. So if you have an electric pump out there, is the landlord paying for that bill or is the tenant paying for that bill? And fences, water sources, and control of noxious weeds. All of these things are negotiable. We have semi-retired or retired landowners that may be in a degree of health that allows them to upkeep some of these things. Maybe they have a tenant coming in from a long ways away to that site. And as part of that, they're able to be able to take care of those. They're not necessarily taking the cattle in, but they're making sure things are going okay for the livestock. And if that's the case, they may be able to get a little bit higher rent.
Overall, the statewide all land average value for the year ending February 1st, 2020 on average was about 3% higher, or about an $80 per acre increase in the prior year's value. This marks the first year-to-year increase since land values peaked in 2014. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.
Thanks, Bill. This is the 42nd edition of this annual report. The publication seeks to provide unbiased information for ag industry professionals to utilize in making the most informed decisions. If you'd like to download the full report, we've got a link to it at the Market Journal website. Finally today, you've probably heard us mention the Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic a few times on the show. Well, if you're looking to send in some samples, there's some new information you should know about. Market Journal's Maddie McIntosh has more.
We try to figure out whatever is wrong with whatever plant you may have.
The Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic is located on the 4th floor of Plant Science Hall on UNL's East Campus. Nebraska Extension Plant and Pest Diagnostics educator Kyle Broderick says there's a variety of services offered to help producers figure out what's wrong with their fields.
Most of our samples are agronomic, and so we do deal with a lot of row crops. But we also deal with a lot of landscape and ornamental crops as well. In addition to plant disease identification, we also do weed identification. We will do insect identification, and we can diagnose nutrient deficiencies and herbicide injury purely based on symptomology on a visual basis.
Due to COVID-19, the clinic has taken extra measures to ensure the safety of the staff and the public when dropping off samples.
What we're doing now is we do have a couple of drop box locations here on campus, and so we have an entomology drop box that is located at the west entrance of Entomology Hall. We also have a larger cooler that can be used for plant samples that are going to the Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic. And that cooler is located at the first floor west entrance of Plant Science Hall on East Campus. Additionally, I am available to meet people outside of the building to pick up samples as well. And we just ask that you call the clinic directly at 402-472-2559. And then if you push 1, that will send you to my cell phone, and I'll be there to answer and come and meet you wherever we need to meet.
For those unable to bring a sample to East Campus, it is possible to mail in specimens for the clinic to review.
We do recommend that people send things via either FedEx or UPS. So we are getting those shipments on a daily basis. Unfortunately, samples that are sent via the Postal Service tends to be delayed 1 or 2 days, and depending on the sample, we can have a lot of degradation that occurs over those 1 or 2 days. But then we also ask that you send samples during the first part of the week. So Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. Really try not to send samples on Thursday or Friday. Otherwise, there's a good chance they'll sit in the mail truck for a couple of days before they actually reach the clinic.
Kyle also says the more information producers give, the better, as it will help the clinic correctly diagnose the problem.
So in addition to making sure that we do get a high quality sample, but also as much background information. And so any chemical history, planting history, the chemistries that were applied last year can also be very beneficial in coming to a correct diagnosis.
Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Maddie McIntosh.
Thanks, Maddie. If you'd like to review these new guidelines or find more information, you can visit go.unl.edu/plant clinic. That's going to do it for this week's show. If you missed a story, be sure to download the Market Journal mobile app or follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. And don't forget, you can get the latest updates on the coronavirus outbreak at covid19.unl.edu. Hope to see you right back here next time. I'm Troy Moling. Thanks for watching.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.